Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Zarov's Chess Channel, and welcome to the TCEC Season 20 Premier Division. So after many rounds, we have seen really some beautiful games, and Stockfish NNUE is still in the lead. But still, I decided to show you some more great games. I think we have seen really beautiful games with beautiful strategies, with beautiful tactical shots. And today's game will be Leela Zero versus Scorpio. Really a beautiful game that Leela Zero played in the so-called Maroxy bind against the Dragon Sicilian. I think the Maroxy bind is really one of the most pragmatic ideas that you can play in chess. It's really annoying, I think, for anyone to handle the Maroxy bind. The positional ideas of these openings are really clear, and I think this was a perfect game in the Maroxy bind play by Leela Zero, with also great strategical but also with great tactical elements in chess. So let's check out now the game. So Leela Zero versus Scorpio. As usual in this engine games, we have this round 1 and fight. So knight to f3 by Leela Zero, c5, d4, c takes d4, knight to d4, knight to f6, knight to pardon me, c4, g6, knight to c3, preparing now the e4 pawn, preparing now the Maroxy bind setup, bishop to g7, and after e4, this is the Maroxy bind setup. White has a dominant position in the center with his two centralized pawns, with also a powerful knight in the center. What I'm suggesting you from Black's perspective to play, at least as a long-term plan, is maybe after something like castling, bishop to e3, I don't know, d6, bishop to e2, knight to c6, maybe castling, and then to go maybe here, knight takes d4, bishop to d4, and here maybe here after queen to d2. My recommendation is to go into position line with knight to c5 after maybe bishop to g7, king to g7, maybe queen to d4, king to g8, and after something like maybe rook to c1, knight to c5. That would be sort of a plan that you can make. I wanted to just show you this fast. This could be a positional plan to go maybe into a very simplified line where we could have a powerful knight and also would battle against the bad bishop. Still, white is slightly better here because it's white that's playing, but I like this setup because we have really a nice cemented knight. As a long-term plan, this could work. At least I'm trying this similar setups, but we'll see now how Scorpio battled, because there are many strategies how to play against the Maroxy bind. One of the strategies can be this positional one, but also it could be a tactical one. Let's go back after move e4 and d6. There are ideas for Black to play e6 and d5 to break the position, or a6 b5, which is, I think, sometimes very complicated to play, very complicated to break the position around the square c4 and e4. Very it's a tough path, I think, to break the position around c4 and e4, because you need many moves in order to make that happen. I think this line that I've suggested you is much more simplified. It leads into a very simplified line in which you have at least the activity with your minor pieces. Then of course it's still a struggle, but as I said, as an idea, it could work. You can also try it out. I've explained these ideas in my hyper accelerated ranked Sicilian defense series, if you have followed my YouTube chess channel, where we reached the Maroxy bind setup, and I've explained you how to play from Black's perspective. I've explained you some ideas, and I've talked about these ideas also in my basics in chess series videos. If you're familiar with also with my YouTube chess channel, I've created this basics with this strategy and opening principles, middle game strategy, and game strategy videos, in which I've explained the common pawn structures that can happen to you, and this is the Maroxy bind pawn structure, and I've explained there how to also counterplay these ideas, but also how to play these ideas with white. So but okay, let's check out now the game here. We have bishop to e2, castling, bishop to e3, knight for b to d7, and this was the last pre-arranged move by the TCEC. Here Scorpio had to play the move knight to d7, but that's, I think, these lines that the TCEC is choosing are really sometimes bad. A better idea, I think, here is to move knight to c6. This has to be said, I think, because knight to c6 is more pragmatic. It's more easier to play, I think, this position from Black's perspective, because the knight is on a natural square, and that's exactly what how you should develop your pieces. Whenever you have the opportunity to develop your knight on the most natural square, like here, like the square c6, you should do it, because here the move knight from b to d7, okay, it's still a developing move, but first of all you're blocking out your bishop. You still have opportunities like in the game here to play the move knight to c5, but here after the move f3, the knight has to be, I think, cemented with the move a5, which wasn't played in the game. Here in the game, bishop to d7 was played by Scorpion, and I think it's a move that gives white the opportunity to be simply very fast in the attack. Queen to d2, still a6 was played, so you see Scorpio goes into this other strategy, goes into this a6 b5 strategy to break the position here around the square c4. We have said also that we could try e6 d5 pawn breakthroughs, but here a6 gives white, I think, a very comfortable game, because Leela Zero played a natural game b3. We have knight to e6, and black would love to trade off the knights because it was a bad knight. It could be kicked away with the move b4. Here after the move bishop to e6, I think the position is more and more again simplified, like black wants to the position to have, but here knight to c2 is a great move by Leela Zero, great positional move, because you see also many times the Maroczy-bind player will retreat with the knight to c2, staying with the knights on the in the center, staying with the powerful knights, really having this compact and glued position here. The bishops are still perfectly fine, and we're searching now for is basically some b4 ideas, maybe some h3 f4 ideas, even g4 g5 ideas. So black will be simply pushed away by the space advantage that white has built here. So in my opinion, this idea to go a5 knight to c5 in long terms could be a much easier line to play, I think, at least for a beginner. Here you see b5 is still not a possibility. There is simply too much control of that square. You have to prepare this move, and even if you try something like rook to b8, still this can be met with knight to a3, and you have still a great protection of the b5. So I'm not sure how black will make progress. So that's why here after the move queen to c7, we have rook to c1, rook to c8, and now knight to d5. A very pragmatic idea again, the so-called Maroczy hop. It's the Maroczy jump. You have to react after knight to e5, knight to d5. We have e takes d5, and here the knight is endangered. What we can notice now, the e file is open, so there are also some threats to simply attack the backward pawn on e7, because there's nothing that can be done after knight to c5. You see, even if you play something like e6 after d takes e6, then you'll be left again with a new weakness with an isolated pawn on d6. So that's why I think something went wrong already here for Scorpio. You see, white's position is simply much easier to play. In the game, we have b4. Leela Zero simply kicks away the knight to a4, and now knight to d4. Here, a5 tries to break the position, tries to break the pawn chain that white has built here. And you see now, now Scorpio plays basically this recommended line to play the move a5, and if you take, of course, then the knight could be cemented around the square c5. But of course Leela Zero is not interested, plays simply a3. We have knight to b6, and now f4 immediately by Leela Zero. Scorpio simply pushed away. You see, the knight is out of game. This bishop is also not so good. These rooks are not doing anything here. It's time to push the pawn on f5. Here the position on the queen side is perfectly fine. Here after a takes b4, we have rook to a3, and now f5. Here you cannot take bishop to d4 if you think you can take out one pawn. It's not an option. You get, of course, the tactic rook to f5, g takes f5, and now the game is over basically, because there are these checks. You have to go here with your king. You can maybe escape temporarily, but you get a very nice tactic here. It's the move c5, and let's see if you try knight to d7. The idea is clear. We want to play bishop to b5. Then if you try knight to d7, again we'll play simply bishop to b5 and play here queen to g8, and it's game over. You cannot cover anymore with the knight. The knight is pinned, so taking the pawn is not an option. So that's why a rook from c to a8, bishop to d3, bishop to f6 by Scorpion, and now queen to e2, rook to a2, and now queen to f3. Although black has now the dominant position on the a file, but these rooks are basically not doing so much. You have created one tempo against the queen, but what now? You haven't included any of other pieces into the game. This bishop is out of game, this bishop is not so good, knight is out of game, and from the beginning I think here the knight cannot take, of course, the c4 pawn. The c4 pawn is perfectly protected. Look at this activity that Leela Zero has here on the king side. The queen and rook battery, the bishop's activity towards the king side. The knight is centralized. You cannot take out the knight. We saw the position, the problems on dark squares when you took out the knight after bishop to d4. So really bad position here for Scorpio. So rook to a3. We have f takes g6, and now h takes g6. If you take out the bishop, that's not good, because you get simply a g takes f7, and from this game, from this point on, it's really a beautiful game, because it would be a very cool sacrifice. After king to g7, we can notice bishop to h6 is a possibility, so you cannot take it here. A new queen will simply promote to a new queen, and it's game over. If you try here to, for instance, after the move king to g7, if again bishop to h6, as I said, if you try of course king to h8, it's not a possibility. We simply promote. The best way here is to play king takes f7, but now we have queen to h5. It's again game over. You have to play king to g8, knight to e6. That's the main goal. You see, these are really beautiful strategies, beautiful tactics that Leela Zero has prepared here. After knight to e6, maybe bishop to e6 can happen, but we can simply take. We're threatening now. Here the move queen to f7 followed with queen to f8, and if you try to cover, then rook to f6. This will be a monster tactic here. After e takes f6, we have queen to f7 anyway, and now queen to f6 is simply losing the game. Again, you could try, but this bishop will come into the game with bishop to g5, bishop to f6, so it's really a bad position. So rook to f6 would be really this cool sacrifice, protecting our very powerful e6 pawn, and then queen to f7 is a possibility. So great tactic. So you see, taking the bishop here on d3 is not an option, and simply bad. So here in the game, h takes g6 was played, and now bishop to g6. This was really cool here by Leela Zero. After f takes g6, we have queen to e4 attacking the pawn, rook to e3. If you protect this pawn, then you could have some troubles with queen to f4. Knight to e6 is still a possibility. Rook to f6. Here's also, I think, a nice tactical shot. You see, if you take with the king, then you get simply too near to the action. If you take with the pawn, then the queen will come into the game. Really beautiful game here by Leela Zero. So here after the move queen to e4, as I said, rook to e3 happened, and here Leela Zero takes the pawn first. We have king to f8, queen to h6, and now Leela Zero takes out the rook. We have now a new position in which black has two minor pieces for the rook, but still a very weird position with the king. There are many things that we can do, I think, here from white's perspective. We can first of all even trade off anything and go into a simplified endgame, because we have now two connected pawns, pass pawns here on the king side. We can also, of course, endanger the king. The king is very unnatural here on in the center, so the king is still an object of our attack. So it's winning here for white. The evaluation is simply much better for Leela Zero. So rook king to d8 was played, king to h1. We have knight to c8, and you could try maybe something like knight to c4 to take out the pawn, but it's not so good, because you get again this tactic, a rook to f6. You see, if you take, first we'll play the check, and then we'll simply take. So it's a really bad position. Let's see. You can maybe try knight to e3, but we can simply take a rook to f8. You can maybe cover with bishop to e8, and now knight to e6 to fork is also a possibility. So as I said, simply the harmony between white pieces is something that black cannot handle anymore in the continuation of the game. What you can do after move king to h1, knight to c4, here after rook to f6, you could maybe try e takes f6, but now queen to h6, the queen gets very active into the game again. King to e7, again queen to g7. We can do some checks, and maybe here Now rook to f1 is also winning. We can play afterwards. Knight to e6 is also a possibility you cannot take because of this tension on the 7th rank. Then afterwards we could again try check, but also take out with the queen here the f6 pawn. So it's simply some to resign here the position for black. So in the game, knight to c8 was played, but it doesn't help you out. Still the queen will sneak in, will get here on the 8th rank. In the game, bishop to d4, we have bishop takes, queen takes d4, rook to e2, and now rook to f8. We have bishop to e8 covering, but now the battery, queen to h8, queen to d7 had to be played, but now c5. The main goal about this move is to simply further attack. We want to create some madness with our connected pawns. D takes c5, we have d takes c5. You cannot take the pawn, of course, you lose here the bishop. In the game, rook to d2, but now queen to h5, and again knight to a7. If you try again rook to d5, it's not good. You get the queen gets deflected from the defense, you lose the rook on d5, so it's not a possibility. Here in the game, knight to a7 was played. We have d6, rook to d3, and now h3. Very important move to creating some breathing spaces, because what we want to do is now simply deflect the queen somehow from the defense of the e8 square. So rook to b1 and rook takes b7 is our tactical goal. Here rook to d4, now comes this move, rook to b1, rook to d3, queen to g6, attacking the rook. The rook has to move, but now rook to b7, it was game over. And this move h3 was very important because you want to create some breathing spaces for the king here in the game. After queen takes b7, queen takes e8, it was a game over here for Scorpio. Great checkmate here by Leela Zero. So again, tactics all over the board. Nice attack by Leela Zero, but as I said, it was simply a bad line. I think that the TCEC has suggested here this move, knight from b to d7 instead of knight to c6. Still, this position has been played many times in chess history, but you see how these engines are pushing away simply in this position. They're pushing simply the minor pieces of blacks away. They're creating this pawn storms, really nice attacks all over the board. So from this point on, the evolution is much better, I think, for black, and we'll see now how the TCEC will make this tournaments happen, because something is not good. I think many of these prearranged lines are simply too bad. You see the evaluation here for white is about 1.3, so it's already much better here for white. And of course the top engines like Leela Zero and Stockfish and NUE are punishing these positions, and they're winning games very easily. But okay, still I think it was a cool and tactical game. If you want to see more tactical and positional brilliancies like this, check out my commented chess games played by computers. Here's the link. And if you want to see maybe the best chess games of all times played by humans, check out my best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.